Hello, everyone. This is Jacque and Roxanne here.
Yes, hi, how are you?
Thanks everyone for coming. Before we go on with the Q&A, there was a couple of things I just wanted to say about the last seminar last weekend. Big thank you to Sven for taking over on that due to the technical problems that Jacque and Roxanne had at the research centre. You've done a really good job with that, mate. Thanks for taking over, and yeah, that was a good session. There's a couple of things that needed probably a bit of expanding upon, which Jacque's going to talk about, which is the issue of using different materials such as recycled materials from dumps or things like clay, etc., in the construction of the Venus Project cities. Jacque's going to actually talk a little bit about this as part of the seminar stroke Q&A. Other than that, I'll pass it over to Jacque and Roxanne now. And then at the end, we're going to have a little discussion about the issue of keeping the Venus Project's information separate from our own personal beliefs and stuff. We'll go into that a little bit later on.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks a lot, Sven, for doing that last weekend. Good job. We appreciate that. Jacque, you want to start with that first question in regards to that they were asking Sven last week?
First, I'd like to say something before that first question. Since language is subject to interpretation, those of you that seem to grasp what it is that I'm trying to talk about, try to help others understand. If you feel you understand what I'm talking about, then try to get the others to understand. Work on them. If you have a better grasp of the situation due to your background, try to get others to understand it. We don't need everybody to understand things. You know, how many people understand how their TV set works, or how their television works, or how their phone works? They don't need to understand as long as they know how to use it. And that's the same with the Venus Project. The technicians that design the cities are different than the other people. The people that design and work on agriculture, that's their job, to grow food for everyone and make sure that the soil is not exhausted. And if it is, they know who to consult, the soil chemists and the soil engineers. So don't worry about everybody not understanding every bit of a Venus Project. They don't have to. Any more than the people that fly in an airliner have to know anything about how it works.
Good point. Well, should we go right to the question in regards to why don't we build something now out of recycled materials, build a resource-based economy out of recycled materials from the dump?
I don't say we can't do that, but it wouldn't be wise to do. I would imagine that when enough people want to build the resource-based economy, or some governments want to finance the research center, that is the first construction, that's what we need. We need the experts that design and work on cities, although I will assist in whatever way I can. The city systems will be maybe of just a few basic designs. Some cities designed to handle as many as 1 million people, and other cities will handle 2,000 or 3,000. So the cities will vary, but they will be standardized. So all we have to do is apply the same system many places in the world to be able to take care of human needs. It isn't the majority of people that give us the operating characteristics. It's the agronomist or the agriculturist that tell us how to grow food. It's the piping experts that know how to bring water into the cities. Everybody doesn't have to know those things. But what you have to know is the things that you want to know. And I'll try to answer those questions to the best of my ability. Thank you.
Speaking of building materials, again, let's see. Why don't we build out of mud instead of cement or clay?
Because we don't have to do that right away. We have to get an inventory of what materials exist. And once we know that, we can design the materials or design the cities based on local materials.
But we want them to be the best strength, the best that we can find up to that time to build more appropriately so they last through extreme weather conditions, so they're healthy? I don't know if mud would meet those criteria.
No, we'll design it of what materials are available at the time.
Okay, here's some questions from somebody, or a group of people in Russia, and I'm sorry if I couldn't take all these questions. I just couldn't interpret what you're really trying to say, but I've condensed the questions. What about people who are murderers and psychopaths? Will we be able to eliminate prisons with these people? Will we be able to eliminate police with these types of people?
It depends on whether the brain is damaged. If the brain is damaged, they have to be confined to institutions. But those institutions do not give them drugs to quiet them down. What they do is they try to work with people with damaged brains and try to develop new cultures in tissue culture, and see if we can replace the missing part of the brain. In other words, the research labs will not operate in poverty. They will operate with whatever equipment they need to operate with. Instead of going to schools, digging up nickels and dimes for research, we will give whatever the labs need to work with. We have the material resources, but there be no limit to what man can do. When free of the necessity of purchasing power and equipment, we will give them whatever equipment they need to help them study the conditions further. We do not put people in prison. We help them. We work on them. We use whatever we know about human behavior to modify their behavior. And by making things available to people, there are not that many crimes that people imagine there will be. In other words, if people have access to their necessities, whatever that is, food, clothing, shelter, housing, they tend not to hurt other people. But if they do, they will be dealt with in terms of helping them to understand to the best of our ability of how to correct the conditions.
How do you get countries to share resources?
You don't unless they volunteer to join. You can't get countries to participate by force or military systems or boycott. What you have to do is wait until conditions are bad enough in that country so they feel, gee, I think I want to join the Venus Project because it will help more people now than the system in existence. And by the way, systems are breaking up all over the world, and it is not until those problems can be solved and that they will turn to the Venus Project. Not all countries will want to join with us immediately, but they will join if their systems do not work. If the established culture that they have, that they want to keep, if it fails to work, they will join the Venus Project. We don't want to force anybody. We want people to make up their minds and say, hey, the Venus Project sounds like the best alternative we know of today. And that's the only system you can use.
Will a board choose the projects?
Well, I don't know what you mean by a board, but the planning group in the Venus Project that plans cities will plan cities to a given population and the availability of resources in that area. The planning group does not dictate policy. They carry out functions such as build a city for 1 million people, build a city for 10,000 people, build a city for 2,000 people. But in order to do that, you have to know how much arable land you have in the region, how much resource manufacturing plants you have in the region. So they don't really direct things. They look into information and utilize that information in each area. That's the way it's done. It isn't a group of people that ask the public, what do you want? The questions they ask is what resources do we have to accomplish a city of 500,000 people? Not knowing that information, they can't even start. So the survey committee that maintains the survey of instrumentation, implementation, and existing resources. This is what determines what we can do.
Eventually, would there be one language spoken?
Well, it will have to be the language of agriculture when we're talking to people in agriculture. It'll have to be the language of engineering in talking to people in the construction area. It will have to be the language of electronics when you make transmission lines. So I would say the nearest thing to a relevant language is a language in the technologies. The everyday language is a very difficult one to interpret technologically.
I think this person might be asking language, would there be one language such as Spanish or English or Russian?
Well, the nearest thing to it today is the English language. It's understood almost all over the world. So since we speak English, and most nations understand English and can speak it, we will emphasize that during the transition. That is, from a monetary system to a resource-based economy. We have to use the language that is commonly used by most people in the world today. As we develop newer languages, highly technical, highly communicative, that will have to be studied after the transition.
Do you feel that hydrogen will be the source of energy in the resource-based economy?
I don't see any single source. If we do research, we're able to separate seawater, separate the oxygen and the hydrogen. At that time, if we can do that, yes, we will use it. But we don't use hydrogen alone. We use wave power, wind power, solar power, heat concentrators, underwater currents. In other words, the Thames River has an inflow and outflow. We will use turbines in that water to help generate electricity. We will use whatever means is available at the time, including geothermal.
What would a transition look like? Are there suggestions for what an in-between system should include?
Well, the in-between systems require education and people that are draftsmen that can help the architects so they don't have to make all the drawings. If people are not architects, if they're draftsmen, if they can help. If they can help in the agricultural field, they will follow the instructions of the agriculturists, who follow the instructions of the survey committee, who follow the instructions of the amount of people that have to be fed, clothed, and housed. So there's no one in the group that directs things. They direct things based on available information. And those of you that understand this, try to transfer this information to non-technical people. I really need your help in that area. We don't have enough staff here to work on all those things at the same time.
How should I approach TV stations, radio stations to present the Venus Project? I tried sending emails explaining what it's about, but I don't get any results. I would say join with our media team. Get in touch with Sheena. You can find it on the website. She is approaching many different television stations, radio stations, people that we feel would be relevant. And she's trying different methods of doing this and arriving at what works most. She's getting some good results. So join with her and work up different approaches and see what works statistically to what type of media you're trying to get in touch with.
And that's an excellent suggestion, Roxanne.
Following the last two Q&A seminars, you mentioned that you don't think the current system will manage to sustain itself much longer. What evidence do you have of that?
It seems that social systems are breaking down all over the world, including the Arab world. They don't like their leadership, but they really don't know what to replace it with. So it's up to us how much work we do, how much information we make available to other countries regarding the Venus Project. And that's all you can do, is educate people. And if you can reach a sufficient number of people, the transition will not be as painful. The transition will be painful because you're taking people from one system called the monetary system to a resource-based economy, and that requires education. Without it, they cannot attain it or even identify with it.
Also, there's a lot of evidence to show that it's breaking down. It's getting more and more polarized. And we've talked about this a lot, as you automate, and industries are going to have to automate in order to keep up with other industries, compete with other industries that are. As you automate, you have less and less people working. We would recommend the book End of Work by Jeremy Rifkin that was actually written 15 years ago and exceeds the predictions that he is talking about. What's happening today is exceeding those predictions. So more people are being laid off of work. And it's not that we're not manufacturing, we're automating more so, and we're outsourcing. But those things together, more people will not have the purchasing power to buy the goods turned out. And that is the end of the monetary system. And they're not accommodating to that. They're not making any plans as to when that happens, what to do in society. So they're going to become more and more militant. And there'll be more and more people in the streets, as you're beginning to see now.
Throughout the world. Yeah.
Right. So it is happening all over. This person says that they have serious problems tolerating their neighbors. They're listening to their TV shows and their radios, that it's very loud. They live in a very close environment. The music, the Hollywood current culture right nearby. I'm just skimming over this. They're having trouble sleeping. I know it's the culture that's sick. I don't want it to drag me down. I can't sit by and watch TV with them. I don't want to end up drinking in clubs like normal people again. I don't feel free will. I don't have free will, and I cannot exceed my environment. I cannot get angry with them. It seems to me that could be hard for some of the unnormal people to live among the normal without a nervous breakdown.
Well, I would suggest that you get earplugs and you put them in your ear at night so you can't hear much of the neighbor's noise or their television sets. And with earplugs, you can read books. And the more you read on technology, the better able to serve in the transition of the Venus Project. Earplugs.
And this person is also suggesting, are there any books? But we have quite a lot of books on the book list. I would check those out.
You can find that on our website, thevenusproject.com.
It's clear that the research that I've done on the Soviet Union has implemented automation in most industries in 1980. They're saying, but they failed. How can we avoid this during the transition, a failure, even though we automate?
There will be failures in all systems. All systems do not work right away. The man or the woman that first tried to build a flying machine did not fly right away. It took a lot of pain, errors, insufficiency in order to overcome the problems. The same is true with the Venus Project. We don't sit down and solve all problems. We attempt to solve problems. And if it doesn't work, we come up with a new idea. We don't stop and say, well, I guess it's against human nature. We try to find out what the forces are that shape human values, that enable them to become creative, and try to generate those conditions within the resource-based economy.
This person is also asking, giving the example of, how come in an equitable society such as the Soviet Union, you had different classes of automobiles?
Because you had different stages of development. You didn't have the resources the United States had, financially and materially. We have far more resources. We bled them dry, trying to compete with us in terms of military systems. The military expenditures are enormous, and we made it impossible for the Soviet Union to keep up with us. And we dissolved their economic system because they did not have the resources to compete.
And in a resource-based economy, we wouldn't make different types of classes of cars. We'd make the best transportation system we could make to go all over the city.
Yes, we would design a transportation system, which doesn't mean automotive means of transportation. The automobile is an inefficient way to move people from one area to another. But if you design a transport system in your city to take you anywhere, the schools, the access centers, the research centers, there'll be transportation to all areas, just like an elevator takes you up to the floor that you're interested in. And that's what we need in transportation, not automobiles. An adequate, silent means of transporting people to any point in that city.
And then there wouldn't be people that would have access to better quality things. We would do away with that type of situation.
We would design the best shoes, the best clothing we're able to design, and make it a...
Okay, from my understanding, you build according to the available resources of the area in question, meaning that in areas without certain resources like steel will have structures lacking that material.
We will probably design new ways of utilizing scarce resources like steel. We'll be able to design newer structural systems similar to the geodesic dome as designed by Buckminster Fuller. There are many ways of using existing resources in a more efficient way. The intelligent management of the Earth's resources means to use resources, get greater use out of them, so we require less insulation, less heating, and less cooling. And by orienting the buildings in different directions and utilizing heat concentrators and other means available in that area, I think we can cut down on a great deal of scarcity in resources.
And also, in some instances, it might be more efficient. There might be more efficient use of resources if we prefabricated in another area and bring sections of the building to other places.
Yes, that would be the most efficient way. To develop prefabricated elements for industrial plants, housing, hospitals, all systems would be designed and available with the best means we have at the time.
I think this is the same person. Will there be money, police, social stratification during the transition? If so, how do we avoid becoming something like the failed socialist systems of the past?
If we wait too long and waste additional resources and don't come up with solutions and try to control populations by military or national guard, we can hurt ourselves. We can go beyond the point of no return. I hope that you're sane enough to work on people and help them out of their dilemma prior to those conditions being difficult to manage.
What attitude will there be towards alcohol and drugs? Will they exist at all?
If you have no money, as a Venus Project uses a non-monetary system. Without money, how can you sell drugs? How can you advocate prostitution? How can you stop gambling? As long as you have a money system, those conditions will prevail. We tend to eliminate the monetary system, which is the cause of most of the problems we have today. The monetary system generates problems by the thousands.
It also generates the psychological problems and the stress that people have and the reasons for wanting to take drugs or drink alcohol. This system puts an awful lot on people that they can't handle. They have no way out. They have no tools to think their way out of things. So drugs help them say the things they want to do or help eliminate some of the stress for a short period of time.
But dependency on drugs is not the answer. Dependency on alcohol is not the answer. Fulfilling human needs is the answer. How do you do that? By making careful study of how we get to be the way we are, what values make some people more liberal than others, and we have to study those values and impart those values to people that don't have those values.
And if we're successful with that, finding the causes of the problems that people have, then we don't think that people would want to resort to alcohol or drugs because they'd find life so exciting.
Yes, I agree with that.
Okay.
You'll be very hard pressed to find a very happy drug addict or a very happy alcoholic. They normally take and get heavily into drugs or alcohol through, problems in their social life. That's just the general way it is, And even people going out clubbing at weekends, like I used to years ago, doing drugs at the weekends. You go clubbing with all your mates and stuff. It's an escapism from the shitty life that you've got, really, to be blunt. And that's quite a common theme with people taking drugs.
Thanks, Andrew. I think you're right, absolutely. And people are bored. They don't know what to do with themselves. I think it was Mate that ran that clinic in Canada that Peter featured on his Zeitgeist film, said that all of his patients were abused sexually or some other way, physically, when they were young, and they were all on drugs. He found that with all of his patients.
He felt that an environment is responsible for most aberrant behavior.
Right. This question, this person was making some assumptions that we don't particularly agree with. He was saying this, the success of the Zeitgeist movie was due more towards the artistic rendition of it rather than the content. And I wouldn't say that that's true. The movie, Zeitgeist movie, had a lot of interesting content about the banking system and religion that you didn't hear anyplace else. So he was asking, should we make movies with more artistic content about the Venus Project rather than linguistic?
We should make movies making the desirability of the Venus Project for most people something to work toward.
Yeah, there has to be movies and media done in all different types of format to reach all different types of people and their background and what they identify with, to help them understand this direction.
Their value system has to be updated so that they learn how to think constructively rather than becoming bitter or angry. They come up with constructive solutions to problems rather than just criticizing a social institution without offering a possible alternative way of doing things. Leaves people in midair, leaves them without the ability to select a direction. If you point out possible directions, at least they can argue with you and bring up opposition to those directions. That's what we want. If you feel there's something you don't understand, really raise questions. We want you to do that. That's the way you approach problems, by raising questions and offering counter solutions. Thank you.
There's another question. I'm not going to read the whole question, it's kind of long, I'll try and condense it. This person says that children have a lot of curiosity about a lot of things. Is it inherent in human nature to grow careless and disrespectful of these wonders? He's saying as they get older, they get more destructive.
I don't think so. I think their culture, their television shows, the movies that shows cowboys shooting Indians and Indians shooting cowboys, and a lot of aggression and punching and fighting. The motion pictures you watch influences your behavior. The novels you read, the role models. There will not be role models that are aggressive. The John Wayne period is over. There'll have to be new information so that people learn countermeasures of behavior in order to solve problems, not anger, not military approaches, not regimentation, not uniformity. In the future, we will emphasize individuality, what you call the freedom of expression of people. And that is what's needed, a new way of thinking about the old world.
Well, they prime kids when they're very young to be competitive. They prime them for war in their toys and their aggressiveness. Another question he has, or are we failing to educate ourselves to keep praising and questioning these wonders in the world?
You can't educate yourself. You have to read books because it takes years to come by solutions to problems. And many people have been working for years on these problems. Get their books, Why We Behave as We Do, Why People Believe Strange Things. You have to get other books. You need the assistance of other people. You can't bring it out of yourself. There are some people that believe that all of us inherit knowledge. All we have to do is bring it out. Not true. We have to learn. Every word that you use, you learned in school. Every number that you use, 1 and 1 is 2, 2 and 2 is 4, 4 and 4 is 8. You're never born with such knowledge, and you can't bring out that which is not within the person's experience. That's why experience is a great teacher. It teaches us what not to do, as well as what to do to accomplish a given task.
And this person goes on to ask a couple more questions. I think you've answered some of it, but if you want to add to this, he says, how can we prevent our children from losing the admiration they have for these wonders in life?
By encouraging that. If you encourage their admiration and curiosity, that will continue. If you fail to have answers for their questions, get out books on the subject so that you can answer your children. If they want to know, Daddy, what keeps us to the earth? And use the word gravity. The kid might say, I see. It's a form of magnetic attraction. And so if you answer your kids' questions rather than saying, I don't know all the time, try to become assistant to your kids' questions. Try to pick up the information. There are books called Science Answers. And you get hold of books like that and you read the answers that the scientists have at the time for different phenomena. But don't try to answer it yourself, such as because.
Yeah, and teach your kids science and reality, because what they wonder about is the real world.
That's what the questions are about. But if you tell your children, we'll always have the poor amongst us, you stop them from thinking up solutions. When you say there will always be wars and rumors of wars, then you're stopping people from thinking. How would you suggest we can stop wars? That's the kind of question to ask your kids. Get them thinking about it.
Does the Venus Project have a plan for a new global time calendar system?
Yes. Yes, we do. We have lots of different plans. Instead of giving a country a name like Brazil or Argentina, we talk of it in terms of their geographical location, the longitude and latitude of the country, not some name. Bavaria disappeared. Sweden, instead of a name, it'll have the longitude and latitude designation, so you know where to look for it on Earth. When it has a name, you don't know where to look for it.
Do you think it's more rational to teach kids at home rather than send them to school?
It depends on the education of the parents. If the parents have a great deal of information, home teaching is efficient. If they don't have that information, sending them to an environment that does would be more efficient. It depends.
In one of your 60, 70 lectures, you're talking about the mind. I understand that the brain can be viewed as a mechanism with electrical charge, but I cannot conceive that the mind is mechanical. Please explain. How do you link self-awareness of the mind with mechanical processes?
Self-awareness are words used by your culture. That doesn't explain what self-awareness is. They said at least we're aware of ourselves. At least we have knowledge that we exist. We think, therefore we are. This is all BS, bad science, because it's not based upon findings. It's based upon opinions. You feel that you're aware of yourself, and you've learned all the words like intellect, think things out. You can't think things out unless you're given tools to think with. If you were brought up in a certain country today, you might whip your children with your belt to alter their behavior. Does that really alter behavior, or does it make them have fear of being whipped? In other words, we have to give children the tools to think with. You have to give them the language of science. You have to give them a methods of inquiry. How do you check things out? You hear many different ideas and you don't know what to identify with. Gee, they say that people have the power to move things by telekinesis. Is that true, or is that a rumor, or is that a system, or is that trickery? If you don't know that, you can't investigate it. You can't investigate metaphysical phenomena unless you study all the different systems that magicians use to generate different illusions. After you've studied how they fake telepathy, when you study all those systems, then you're a qualified experimenter and researcher. Without the qualifications, you come up with, gee, I've seen it with my own eyes. I've seen this woman turn the pages of a book without touching the book. Well, the way that's done is they wear a little unit in their mouth that looks like a whistle. And when they blow through it, that turns the pages of a book. But if you don't know how they affect telekinesis by trickery, then you have no way of evaluation. You have to learn more about the scientific method of checking things out.
I guess this question's for me. You work with Jacque for many years. How can you describe changes in your thought processes and behavioral patterns? Can you specify basic stages in that changes, or it was a gradual process? Really, when I first met Jacque, he taught me how to draw technically. That was a very significant process, something that was related to the real world. I came from an art background, but I didn't know how to technically draw. And this is what he does with a lot of people that come and live here. He gives them a foot in the real world, teaches them something related to science, because he teaches the science behind drawing. That was a good tool. Then I learned how to do models and learned how to build real buildings. So that whole stage was a process of understanding the real world around you. That's why Jacque always specifies learning science, because it's really related to the real world. A lot of people, and I hate to say, a lot of women mostly go into fields that have no relationship, economics, really that has no relationship to the real world, to science, economics, or they end up in metaphysics because they don't have a grasp of how the world works. It's kind of like a stage from religion to metaphysics. They asked if it was a gradual process. It is a gradual process learning this, and it's not any time where you come and you think, oh, you've got it, because there's always something more to learn. Jacque is always learning new things and stating things differently. I always thought it was an interesting process. When I used to listen to Jacque's lectures, I used to go to the lectures that he gave at his home in the 70s, and I would learn certain things and I would say to myself, oh, that's what he meant by that. But when I read more books or heard more things that he talked about, I had more things to draw from, more tools to draw from. And I'd listen to the same words and I'd think, a couple months later, and I'd think, oh no, he really meant this with that. So the more books you read, I would say get Jacque's lectures. We're trying to document as much as we can from Jacque here. Get some of Jacque's old lectures of the 60s and 70s when you can. Get some of the lectures from 2010 to 2011, because that helps you put more things together. It's a gradual process.
That's true. And it just takes time.
It does.
There's no substitute for that.
Oh, one thing that Jacque used to mention when I first came to his lectures, like 35 years ago, he said it's really like learning a new language and getting proficient in it. And it takes about 7 years, I think he used to say, to really learn a language well and begin to think in that language and put things together. Learning this is a completely new viewpoint. After a few weeks of going to Jacque's lectures, I realized that everything I learned in the past had no significance. Of course, I didn't have a science background. So I kind of had to dismiss the way I put everything together and the way I looked at things and the way I tried to explain things, and took on learning things, everything, from all over again. So it did have that effect on me. Let's see, another question. I'd like to know if there are still points, fields he's still working on, that you're still working on. Are you still working on new things?
Yes, how to condense information and make it understandable to non-technical people. This is a problem today. Simplifying examples so that the average person can understand it without being a scientist.
I think this person expands on this. Jacque is always designing. Every day he does many new sketches. When I say designing, I don't mean just doing a picture. When he works up a building or a design, he does sketches and solves problems as to how that building will be put together, kind of the engineering of it, and what even the factory might look like to put it together. Let's see. Okay, they're asking, are there still things you need to figure out? I mean, he sounds sure about the project, but yet, are there still things he feels doubtful about?
Well, I can't make decisions for other people, but if other people do not practice talking to people and presenting the Venus Project in acceptable form, that's the only thing I feel skeptical about what other people might do. If they go off in their own direction and deviate from the teachings of the Venus Project, they will hold things back. So the best thing to do is to find out every aspect that you can understand about the Venus Project and practice that. If you have any improvement suggestions to make, send them in to the Venus Project. We're very much interested. But so far, there are no hidden areas or mysterious areas.
Can we assume 100,000 people to come together and build on an empty land, the Venus Project city, without external financial injection? I don't know how.
We live in a financial world today. We can't just build. We have to have people donate the land. Then we have to have people pay for the material resources to put up the building. That would be the transition. The transition is between a monetary system and a resource-based economy. Without contributions of land, finances, or material resources, we can't do a thing. We don't have the purchasing power to buy the materials to put up a new city. People say, why don't you do that now? Are you going to finance it?
Yeah.
We just can't do it. We need the help of other people too. We do all we can with what we have here. Without your help, we can't accomplish anything.
How is human labor to be planned, coordinated for things that can't or aren't automated yet?
I can't conceive of anything that can't be automated.
Well, initially in the transition.
In the transition, we will use human labor or whatever it takes to get things done. Yes, during the transition, we will use some aspects of the monetary system and we will purchase materials to build a new city. We have to do that. That's the transition. It will be painful, it will be troublesome, but I can't control that.
Also, I'm sure people would work towards this who understand the benefits, and as soon as they start to see something, some reinforcement in their standard of living, something improving, this will reinforce other people to work towards it as well, where we need people to work.
Yes, that's absolutely true. People will be rewarded for their contributions by seeing the end of poverty, the end of hunger, the end of children with swollen bellies, and people that need medical care and can't afford it. They will see all that come to an end. They'll see the end of military systems, armies, navies, National Guard, prisons, police, all that will be gone. It's a strange thing today to watch people. They watch, they try to advocate decency and ethics in business, and they, through taxation, pay the salaries of the police officers and the National Guard and the Army, and yet it's controlled by the monetary system that pays very little taxes. They don't even pay for the police salaries. It's the working people that are arrested by the police who they support. They don't seem to understand that. That's what they have to get across to the police. You're not sponsored by the wealthy people. They hardly pay taxes. In fact, they'd like to pay nothing at all. It's you that's carrying the police force, and they use that police force to arrest you and abuse you. The policemen don't understand either. They're propagandized just as well as other people.
I want to go back to the people working in terms of, there's so many people today that volunteer and donate funds when they can't volunteer and wish that they could volunteer more when they see this people's lives being improved. That makes them feel good. So I don't think we'll have any trouble getting people to work towards this direction if they see the benefit of it. Okay.
When they see the benefit.
Yeah. Okay. When Jacque was answering the first question about how to deal with murderers, psychopaths, etc., Jacque spoke about how to give them, if I understand it correctly, the best medical and psychological treatment available in equilibrium, in order to help them, excuse me. That sounds amazing to me. But what if such treatment should require too many resources, manpower, equipment, since resources are certainly managed in order to maintain a sustainable equilibrium?
We have more than enough help. There's no shortage of psychological or behavioral advisors. We have plenty of them. There's no shortage in that area. The shortage is in creative thinking, which means they have to be exposed to how to think creatively. We can make any person creative. It's not an inborn characteristic. There's no such thing as artistic people that inherit artistic ability. All that's due to ignorance. They don't know what the factors are that generate artistic behavior or creativity. They really don't know, so they think it's inherited. They think that some people are good, some people are bad. Not true. They're all conditioned by society, from serial killers to racketeers, all made by the world you live in.
Let's see, the Venus Project has an excellent educational reading list. When we are learning from this reading list, can you please outline a few things we can do so we can learn the information?
Website.
To read aloud, talk about ideas we read. Sure, I mean, the person's answering the question. To read aloud, it's always good to read aloud to others. Talk about ideas we read about, etc. Also, how important are constructs such as state of the flow, memory, pure mathematics, abstract ideas, and imagination to the learning process?
Whatever helps the learning process will be used. And if it doesn't, it'll be bypassed.
State of flow, memory. I'm not sure what they're asking. Let's see.
Who decides what is relevant and that which is not relevant? The decision is made by how well the system works. If it works, we use it. If it doesn't work, we do further research to improve it.
Okay, I'm a student of psychology and cognition. Sometimes while listening to you, I feel that standard education is wasting my time. What are your thoughts on education today in terms of strategy? Do you have suggestions regarding education? How can we best contribute to realizing the Venus Project through our education and gaining skills? I live in a country where education is free. Let me go back to the question. Your thoughts. Do you have any thoughts on education today?
We have recommended reading.
Right.
On our website, we have all kinds of books. We don't sell them, but you can get them possibly on the internet. So read the books we recommend that you read. That will help further your understanding of the Venus Project. That's the way to do it.
And I'd say get the materials that we have on Jacque's lectures about different topics regarding this.
And if you can possibly do it, visit the website. Not only that, but visit the Venus Project.
Yeah. But also, there are a lot of students that write us who are introducing this direction to their professors, and their professors are getting excited about it and handing out different well, no, they're making the students do different exercises regarding the Venus Project. So if you try and talk to your fellow students about these ideas, if you can start the Venus Project within your college, start a chapter there, that would be excellent. And then introduce it to your professors and see what you can do, and see if you can get Jacque to lecture at the different universities. That's helpful as well.
And broadcasting companies.
Right. Jacque is saying, and broadcasting companies. Do you think it's possible to implement a resource-based economy in a small scale inside the current monetary system?
No, no way.
Until more people adopt the Venus Project?
No.
No, but there's a lot of work
You
to
can
do
hold
towards it.
meetings and inform people, and they in turn can inform other people. That's the only way to do it. The only way that I know of that'll work is through information. Without it, people can't do anything.
We are trying to get a first city going wherever possible, trying to get funding for this, and it would be as close to this as possible. It would be a research center. We would want to have sections, if it was for another country, we would want to have a section for the Venus Project within it. Jacque would work with the students he'd want to work with the university students to have them involved in the development of this and introduce creativity and this type of thinking regarding building. So we do as much as we could within the first city when we get that done, if it's a transitional city. So we answered that. Has Jacque done any research to the scalability of cities, scaling them in different sizes? Is it more feasible to make many small cities or a large city, a city like New York with 1 million people?
It depends on the availability of resources, how far they are from the city, and how long it would take to transport them, and how much energy would be used in transporting building materials. All those things are taken into consideration by the planning center. The planning center does all the groundwork for the building of new cities.
What are your thoughts about private property for personal houses?
Oh, I don't see the use of it. I don't see the use of you owning anything. I think what you really want is the use of things when you want them. You don't have to own things. You don't have to own the books in the library. You can borrow them, check them out again, and reread them. But the concept of ownership is a very primitive concept. Now, the only thing you will own in the Venus Project is your own creations. If you do paintings or sculpture, or you make gems, whatever you do, you can't sell them to other people. You can give them to the people you like. But there's no business transactions in the Venus Project.
What does Jacque think about Thrive movement, the documentary? We saw the trailer for that, and we just bought it, we downloaded it, and we are going to view it soon. We will try and answer that next Sunday if we get a chance to look at that. Hopefully we can do that this week. How would we get to fundamentalist religious people in many underdeveloped regions or in deep rural areas?
By using the Bible and showing them, if you possibly can, the contradictions. In other words, in the Bible it says thou shalt not kill. We don't follow that. When one nation gets mad at another nation, they kill thousands of people. That's the way you do it, by educating them. You can't do it without educating them, giving them a way of thinking. Why your way of thinking is more efficient than the old-time religion. You have to convince them of that. And if you can't, you have to practice more until you can. I've been able to do that and turn a lot of religious people away from verbal religion and transfer their religious practice into a working system. And that's what the Venus Project is. The Venus Project is building the brotherhood of humanity throughout the world. It's everything religion talks about that doesn't know how to accomplish.
Yes, and Jacque usually approaches them on their level, talking about thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, using some of their biblical text that identifies with this system as well.
Jesus Christ said that the love of money is the root of all evil. And if we learn to get rid of the money system, when Jesus said, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, there's no money in heaven, no private property, no social stratification. And so when you understand that, you can understand the Venus Project. It's the word spirituality translated to no war, no killing, no prisons, no armies, no navies. That's what the Venus Project is about, making the world safe for all the world's people.
We are going to have to cut it at an hour. Andrew wanted to say something. I'm going to copy and paste the rest of these questions so we can address them next week. We have to go down to Occupy Miami. Jacque is going to speak there today, so we're going to have to cut it now. But we appreciate all the questions.
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity to answer these questions.
Thanks, Jacque and Roxanne. Once again, a great seminar. Questions and answers. Jacque, totally on point today. Just wanted to cover a couple of small issues that have come up over the last couple of weeks. One of them is where people are getting their personal beliefs and the Venus Project kind of mixed in a bag together that doesn't necessarily lead to a beneficial introduction to others to this direction. So basically what I'd like to say is that we're not here to dictate what people believe. We're not here to say you can't believe in a God, you can't believe in metaphysical stuff, that's not what we're about. What you choose to believe is entirely down to you, and whether or not at a later date you choose not to, you develop and sort of don't believe it, or you develop a belief in something that you haven't got right now, that's entirely down to you. That's a personal choice. And we don't feel the need, we shouldn't really feel that we have to tell people what they can and can't talk about in relation to the, people that are helping out with the Venus Project, what they can believe in and stuff. So, and there is a bit of this going on within the community, and I think, we need to step back and just accept that we all come from different cultural upbringings, we all come from different social upbringings, our families are different, we've all got different ideas about the world and how things are. But at the same time, we need to learn to keep those things separate from the Venus Project. So when we're promoting the Venus Project, if I'm a Christian, I wouldn't expect to be promoting the Venus Project in a way that it comes across as being a Christian project, because it's clearly not a Christian project. Although many of the things that we advocate certainly would fit in within Christianity, which is what would drive a Christian to sort of come to the Venus Project and be involved in it. And we have many Christians in the global activism teams and stuff. And the same with people from sort of metaphysical beliefs and stuff. The Venus Project doesn't promote those things. We don't advocate that we use metaphysics as a solution to any of the problems. Obviously, the tenets of the Venus Project are very different from that. So it's just important to keep those things, them things definitely separate, especially within the teams. If you're going to be having discussion groups or whatever, keep them to the Venus Project. That's what we're here for. Other than that, that's pretty much it, really. I just want to say thank you to Sven again for last week's Q&A. I thought it was really good. Done a good job on that. Thanks to Daniel also for helping out with that and with the technical issues and stuff. So thanks everyone for coming. Speak to you next week.